The Count of Monte Cristo, continued the servant, begs these gentlemen's permission to wait upon them as their neighbor, and he will be honored by an intimation of what time they will please to receive him. Faith, Franz, whispered Albert, there is not much to find fault with here. Tell the Count, replied Franz, that we will do ourselves the pleasure of calling on him. The servant bowed and retired. That is what I call an elegant mode of attack, said Albert. You were quite correct in what you said, Signor Pastrini. The Count of Monte Cristo is unquestionably a man of first-rate breeding and knowledge of the world. Then you accept his offer? Said the host. Of course we do, replied Albert. Still, I must own I am sorry to be obliged to give up the cart and the group of reapers, it would have produced such an effect. And were it not for the windows at the Palazzo Rispoli, by way of recompense for the loss of our beautiful scheme, I don't know but what I should have held on by my original plan. What say you, Franz? Oh, I agree with you, the windows in the Palazzo Rispoli alone decided me. The truth was, that the mention of two places in the Palazzo Rispoli had recalled to Franz the conversation he had overheard the preceding evening in the ruins of the Colosseum between the mysterious unknown and the Transteveron, in which the stranger in the cloak had undertaken to obtain the freedom of a condemned criminal, and if this muffled-up individual proved, as Franz felt sure he would, the same as the person he had just seen in the Teatro Argentino, then he should be able to establish his identity, and also to prosecute his researches respecting him with perfect facility and freedom. Franz passed the night in confused dreams respecting the two meetings he had already had with his mysterious tormentor, and in waking speculations as to what the morrow would produce. The next day must clear up every doubt, and unless his near neighbor and would-be friend, the Count of Monte Cristo, possessed the ring of Gyges, and by its power was able to render himself invisible, it was very certain he could not escape this time. "8 o'clock found Franz up and dressed, while Albert, who had not the same motives for early rising, was still soundly asleep. The first act of Franz was to summon his landlord, who presented himself with his accustomed obsequiousness. "Pray, Signor Pastrini, asked Franz, is not some execution appointed to take place today? Yes, Your Excellency, but if your reason for inquiry is that you may procure a window to view it from, you are much too late. Oh, no, answered Franz, I had no such intention, and even if I had felt a wish to witness the spectacle, I might have done so from Monte Pincho, could I not? Ah! exclaimed mine host, I did not think it likely your Excellency would have chosen to mingle with such a rabble as are always collected on that hill, which, indeed, they consider as exclusively belonging to themselves. Very possibly I may not go, answered Franz, but in case I feel disposed, give me some particulars of today's executions. What particulars would your Excellency like to hear? Why, the number of persons condemned to suffer, their names, and description of the death they are to die. That happens just lucky, Your Excellency. Only a few minutes ago they brought me the tavolettas. What are they? Sort of wooden tablets hung up at the corners of streets the evening before an execution, on which is pasted up a paper containing the names of the condemned persons, their crimes, and mode of punishment. The reason for so publicly announcing all this is, that all good and faithful Catholics may offer up their prayers for the unfortunate culprits, and, above all, beseech of heaven to grant them a sincere repentance. And these tablets are brought to you that you may add your prayers to those of the faithful, are they? Asked Franz somewhat incredulously. Oh, dear, no, Your Excellency. I have not time for anybody's affairs but my own and those of my honorable guests, but I make an agreement with the man who pastes up the papers, and he brings them to me as he would the playbills, that in case any person staying at my hotel should like to witness an execution, he may obtain every requisite information concerning the time and place, etc. Upon my word, that is a most delicate attention on your part, Signor Pastrini, cried Franz. Why, Your Excellency, returned the landlord, chuckling and rubbing his hands with infinite complacency, I think I may take upon myself to say I neglect nothing to deserve the support and patronage of the noble visitors to this poor hotel. I see that plainly enough, my most excellent host, and you may rely upon me to proclaim so striking a proof of your attention to your guests wherever I go. Meanwhile, oblige me by a sight of one of these tavolettas. Nothing can be easier than to comply with your Excellency's wish, said the landlord, opening the door of the chamber. I have caused one to be placed on the landing, close by your apartment. Then, taking the tablet from the wall, he handed it to Franz, who read as follows. The public is informed that on Wednesday, February 23d, being the first day of the carnival, executions will take place in the Piazza del Popolo, by order of the Tribunal of the Rota, of two persons, named Andrea Rondola, and Peppino, otherwise called Rocca Priori, the former found guilty of the murder of a venerable and exemplary priest, named Don Cesare Terlini, canon of the Church of St. John Lateran, and the latter convicted of being an accomplice of the atrocious and sanguinary bandit, Luigi Vampa, and his band. The first named malefactor will be subjected to the mazzuola, the second culprit beheaded. The prayers of all good Christians are entreated for these unfortunate men, that it may please God to awaken them to a sense of their guilt, and to grant them a hearty and sincere repentance for their crimes. This was precisely what Franz had heard the evening before in the ruins of the Colosseum. No part of the program differed: the names of the condemned persons, their crimes, and mode of punishment, all agreed with his previous information. In all probability, therefore, the Trastevere was no other than the bandit Luigi Vampa himself, and the man shrouded in the mantle the same he had known as Sinbad the Sailor, but who, no doubt, was still pursuing his philanthropic expedition in Rome, as he had already done at Porto Vecchio and Tunis. Time was getting on, however, and Franz deemed it advisable to awaken Albert, but at the moment he prepared to proceed to his chamber, his friend entered the room in perfect costume for the day. The anticipated delights of the carnival had so run in his head as to make him leave his pillow long before his usual hour. Now, my excellent Signor Pastrini, said Franz, addressing his landlord, since we are both ready, do you think we may proceed at once to visit the Count of Monte Cristo? Most assuredly, replied he. The Count of Monte Cristo is always an early riser, and I can answer for his having been up these 2 hours. Then you really consider we shall not be intruding if we pay our respects to him directly? Oh, I am quite sure. I will take all the blame on myself if you find I have led you into an error. Well, then, if it be so, are you ready, Albert? Perfectly. Let us go and return our best thanks for his courtesy. Yes, let us do so. The landlord preceded the friends across the landing, which was all that separated them from the apartments of the Count, rang at the bell, and, upon the door being opened by a servant, said, I Signori Francesi. The domestic bowed respectfully, and invited them to enter. They passed through 2 rooms, furnished in a luxurious manner they had not expected to see under the roof of Signor Pastrini, and were shown into an elegantly fitted-up drawing-room. The richest Turkey carpets covered the floor, and the softest and most inviting couches, easy chairs, and sofas, offered their high-piled and yielding cushions to such as desired repose or refreshment. Splendid paintings by the first masters were ranged against the walls, intermingled with magnificent trophies of war, while heavy curtains of costly tapestry were suspended before the different doors of the room. If your excellencies will please to be seated, said the man, I will let the Count know that you are here. And with these words he disappeared behind one of the tapestried portieres. As the door opened, the sound of a slow reached the ears of the young men, but was almost immediately lost, for the rapid closing of the door merely allowed one rich swell of harmony to enter. Franz and Albert looked inquiringly at each other, then at the gorgeous furnishings of the apartment. Everything seemed more magnificent at a second view than it had done at their first rapid survey.